Hey there, and welcome. Today we're diving deep into one of the most common and maybe most misunderstood signs of aging, going gray. But as you're about to see, this isn't just some simple story about getting older. Oh no, it's a really fascinating biological drama full of stem cells, stress, and even self-sacrifice, all happening right inside our hair follicles. All right, let's dive into what's really going on.
You know the moment. We've all been there. You're just minding your own business, looking in the mirror, and bam, there it is. That one single, wiry silver strand that seems to have appeared out of nowhere. But what's the actual story behind it? What is happening deep down on a microscopic level to flip that switch from color to, well, no color?
Okay, so to figure out why hair loses its color, we've got to start with how it gets it in the first place. The best way to think about it is to imagine that every single hair follicle on your head is its own little high-tech factory. And its sole job, its entire purpose, is to manufacture a perfectly colored strand of hair. And just like any factory, it's got a crew of specialized workers.
And here they are. Meet the stars of the show, the melanocytes. These are the skilled workers on the factory floor. Their whole job is to produce melanin. That's the actual pigment that gives your hair its unique color, and then they carefully inject it into the hair cells as they grow.
But you might be asking, where do these workers come from? I mean, they don't last forever, right? Right. And that's where these guys come in, the Melanocyte Stem Cells, or MSCs for short. Think of them as the reserve army, or trainees, living in a protected little nook of the follicle called the bulge. They're just waiting to be called up. Every time a new hair cycle starts, a few of these stem cells get the signal to step up and become the next generation of pigment-producing workers.
So, in a perfect world, here's how the assembly line runs. A new hair starts to grow, which acts as a signal. That signal tells the stem cells, hey, we need you. So the MSCs mobilize, they leave their cozy home in the bulge and travel down to the main factory floor. There, they transform into full-blown melanocytes and get to work coloring the new strand of hair. It's this beautiful, regenerative cycle that repeats for decades, until it doesn't. So what goes wrong?
And that right there is the big mystery. Why does this perfectly good pigment factory eventually start to shut down? Well, it turns out there isn't just one smoking gun. Recent science has basically put together a lineup of 3 prime suspects. 3 different ways this whole process can just fail.
Okay, suspect number 1 is something researchers are calling the traffic jam. In this scenario, the stem cells, that reserve army, they're still there, they're totally fine, but they get stuck. For some reason, they lose their ability to move, to make that critical journey from their reserve down to the factory floor. So you've got a factory that's ready to go, but the pigment workers just never show up for their shift. The result? A hair still grows, but it comes out completely colorless.
Now, suspect number 2, this one sounds a bit more dramatic. Internal bleach. And believe it or not, it's pretty much what it sounds like. The process of making hair color actually creates a tiny amount of hydrogen peroxide as a byproduct. Now, when we're young, a special enzyme called catalase cleans it all up no problem. But as we get older, we produce less catalase, so the hydrogen peroxide starts to build up and it wreaks havoc, breaking down the pigment machinery. Yeah, it is literally bleaching your hair from the inside out before it even sees the light of day. And finally, our third suspect, the emergency evacuation. This one is all about severe stress. You know how you hear those stories about people going gray practically overnight from a huge shock? Well, it's not a myth. Science has actually figured out why. An intense stress event can flood your system with a chemical called norepinephrine. And in the hair follicle, this acts like a giant panic button. It screams at all the reserve stem cells to activate and convert at once. It's a mass exodus that completely and permanently drains the reservoir, leaving nothing left for future hairs.
Okay, so we've got our lineup of suspects. A traffic jam, a case of internal bleach, and a stress-induced evacuation. It all sounds like a series of unfortunate system failures, right? But what if I told you that in some cases, going gray isn't a failure at all? What if it's a feature, a deliberate protective measure?
Seriously, just think about that for a second. Is going gray a bug or a feature? This one question is changing everything about how scientists are looking at this entire process. For so long, we just assumed it was a consequence of things breaking down. But new research is suggesting it might be an active programmed defense mechanism.
And here is the bombshell. The leading idea now is that going gray could be your body's way of protecting you from something much, much worse, cancer. Specifically, melanoma, a very dangerous skin cancer that can arise from these exact same pigment-producing cells. So, how on earth does that work? Professor Emike Nishimura, who is a real pioneer in this field, put it perfectly. Her team found that when one of those precious melanocyte stem cells gets damaged, say from UV radiation or other toxins, it faces a critical choice. It could try to repair itself, but that's risky. A bad repair could turn it cancerous. Or it can basically self-destruct to protect the body, and the body chooses self-destruct. The damaged cell is forced to mature, and then it just disappears. This eliminates the cancer risk, but it also means one less cell in the reserve pool. The result is gray hair. It's an incredible trade-off, a silver strand for a safer you.
Okay, so understanding the why is fascinating, right? But let's be honest. The question everyone is thinking is, can we do anything about it? Can we reverse it? For literally thousands of years, the only option was to cover it up. But now, for the first time, scientists are seriously looking into ways to biologically turn back the clock.
First off, we have to talk about genetics, because it's a huge piece of the puzzle. When you start going gray is largely written in your DNA. What's considered premature for one person might be totally normal for another, and this often varies across different populations, which just goes to show how deeply genetics are involved. And for researchers, that genetic link is a huge clue.
And let's be real. Trying to hide the gray is not a new thing. We've been at it for, well, forever. Ancient Egyptians were using henna. Ancient Romans used some pretty nasty, toxic lead-based potions. Then, in 1907, modern synthetic hair dye was invented, and it changed everything. But now, more than a century later, the goal is shifting. It's not just about covering the gray anymore, it's about preventing it from happening at all.
So, what's on the horizon? This is where it gets really exciting. For one, scientists are trying to figure out how to unstick those trapped stem cells. You know, clear up that traffic jam we talked about. And get this, some incredible new studies have already shown that graying caused by stress can sometimes reverse itself if the stress goes away. How cool is that? And of course, there's genetics. Researchers have zoned in on specific genes, like one called IRF4, that seems to control the whole pigment process, which could open the door to all kinds of new therapies.
Wow, so we've gone from this tiny little factory in our skin all the way to the cutting edge of gene therapy. The biggest takeaway here is that going gray isn't just a sign of getting older. It's this incredibly complex story, a story of cellular traffic jams, internal chemistry, sudden stress, and even, amazingly, a noble sacrifice to keep us safe from cancer.
And all of this leaves us with one final, kind of personal question. Think about it. For many of us, our gray hairs are like a map of our lives. They mark the stresses we've survived, the lessons we've learned, the wisdom we've gained. So, if science handed you a button that could erase all of that, would you press it? Would you really want to erase that visible part of your own history? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more How Meets History.